Black elderly woman, humiliated at the bank, luckily. Vin Diesel was there, like the video for good health. The morning sun glared down on the bustling streets of Los Angeles as Evelyn Carter, a dignified 72-year-old retired teacher, made her way to the bank. Dressed in a tailored blue blazer and a pearl necklace she had owned for decades, Evelyn carried herself with the quiet grace of someone who had lived a life of dignity, strength, and kindness. Today, she was making a simple trip to deposit a check from her late husband's pension. But little did she know this visit would turn into a nightmare, and an encounter she'd never forget. But before we dive into what happens next, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below and please like the video. Thank you. The bank lobby buzzed with activity as Evelyn walked to the counter. The young teller glanced up briefly before giving her a dismissive look. Yes? Can I help you? He asked with a sharp edge to his tone, not bothering to hide his impatience. Evelyn handed over her check and ID with a warm smile. Good morning. I'd like to deposit this, please. The teller glanced at the check, then at her ID. His brows furrowed, and he suddenly leaned back in his chair, his lips curling into a sneer. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside. This check looks suspicious. We'll need to verify it. Evelyn was taken aback. Suspicious? It's from my late husband's pension. Everything is in order. The teller didn't bother to hide his disdain. Well, you can't blame us for being cautious. People try to pull scams all the time, especially with checks like this. He gestured toward the check like it was radioactive. Take a seat. This will take a while. Evelyn's cheeks flushed with embarrassment as people in the bank began to glance her way. She felt the weight of their judgmental stares. She wanted to speak up, but the teller's smug demeanor left her feeling powerless. She turned to sit down, clutching her purse tightly, her dignity crumbling. At that moment, the sound of heavy boots on the marble floor echoed through the lobby. A figure stepped forward, tall and commanding, his muscular frame impossible to ignore. Vin Diesel, yes, ** Vin Diesel, had just walked into the bank. Dressed in a leather jacket and jeans, his mere presence seemed to electrify the room. Vin had come to the bank on a routine errand, but his sharp eyes quickly took in the scene unfolding before him. He saw the teller's dismissive attitude, the humiliation on Evelyn's face, and the discomfort of the other patrons who pretended not to notice. Something about the situation didn't sit right with him. As Evelyn sat down, Vin walked straight up to the counter. Hey, he said, his deep voice cutting through the noise. What's going on here? The teller looked up, startled. Excuse me? You heard me, Vin said, crossing his arms. Why are you treating this lady like that? What's the problem? The teller stammered, clearly intimidated. Sir, this doesn't concern you. We're just following protocol. Protocol, huh? Vin's tone was calm, but firm, laced with an unmistakable edge of authority. Let me see that check. The teller hesitated, but under Vin's unrelenting stare, he handed it over. Vin glanced at it, then at Evelyn, who sat quietly, watching the scene unfold. He turned back to the teller. This is a legitimate check. You can see that. So why are you giving her a hard time? Sir, we have procedures. Yeah, I get it. Procedures, Vin interrupted, his voice rising slightly. But there's a way to treat people, and this ain't it. She's a customer, not a suspect. By now, the entire bank had fallen silent, all eyes on Vin and the trembling teller. Evelyn's eyes welled with tears, not of sadness, but of gratitude. For the first time that morning, someone was standing up for her. Vin turned to Evelyn and extended a hand. Ma'am, come with me. Evelyn hesitated, but Vin's kind smile gave her the courage to stand. He led her past the counter, straight to the bank manager's office. Without knocking, he pushed the door open. The manager, a balding man in his 50s, looked up in surprise. Can I help you? Yeah, Vin said, his tone sharp. You can start by apologizing to this lady. Your staff just humiliated her in front of everyone for no reason. The manager looked from Vin to Evelyn, clearly flustered. I'm sorry for any misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Vin cut him off. Your teller accused her of fraud without any evidence. That's not a misunderstanding. That's discrimination." The manager stammered, struggling to find the right words. I'll look into this." "You'll do more than that," Vin said. "You're going to make this right. Now," realizing he was outmatched, the manager quickly apologized to Evelyn, instructing his staff to process her check immediately. But Vin wasn't done. He turned to the manager. "And you're going to retrain your employees, because if I hear about anything like this happening again, I'll make sure everyone knows how you treat your customers. Got it?" The manager nodded, visibly shaken. "Yes, sir. Absolutely." As they walked out of the office, Evelyn looked up at Vin, her voice trembling. "Thank you. I didn't know what to do." Vin smiled down at her. "You don't have to thank me. No one should be treated like that. Ever." By the time they left the bank, the atmosphere had completely shifted. The staff was suddenly polite, falling over themselves to make amends. Evelyn's check was deposited without further issue, and she walked out with her head held high. As they parted ways, Vin placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, ma'am. Don't ever let anyone make you feel less than you are." Evelyn smiled, a spark of pride returning to her eyes. "You're a good man, Mr. Diesel. Thank you." Vin watched her go, his heart heavy with both anger and hope. The world still had a long way to go, but moments like this reminded him that standing up for what's right could make all the difference. As Evelyn walked away from the bank, her stride more confident than it had been in years, Vin Diesel lingered for a moment in the lobby. The murmurs from the other customers and staff hadn't stopped. Everyone was abuzz about what had just happened. A few people approached Vin, some out of admiration, others simply curious about why a celebrity would involve himself in such a situation. A young woman, a bank employee who had been watching the scene unfold, cautiously approached him. "Mr. Diesel," she began nervously, clutching a clipboard, "I just wanted to say thank you. That was incredible. I've worked here for 3 years, and I've seen things like this happen before, but no one's ever stood up like that." Vin turned to her, his sharp gaze softening slightly. "Then it's time for that to change. No one should be humiliated just for trying to live their life. And no one should have to deal with prejudice, especially not here, in a place they trust with their money." The woman nodded, visibly moved. "I'll speak to the manager about what happened. Maybe I can help push for that retraining you mentioned." Vin gave her a small, approving smile. "Good. That's how change starts. One person standing up when it counts." As Vin walked toward the exit, he couldn't help but think about Evelyn's quiet strength. She had clearly faced more than her fair share of hardships in life, and yet she had carried herself with dignity despite the blatant mistreatment. He felt a deep respect for her, but also a simmering frustration at the system that allowed such behavior to persist. Meanwhile, Evelyn, still processing what had happened, decided to treat herself to a small victory lunch at her favorite cafe down the street. As she sat by the window with a cup of tea and a scone, her mind raced. She wasn't just grateful for Vin's intervention, she felt empowered. For too long, she had accepted indignities, small and large, without protest, simply because it felt safer to remain quiet. But today had reminded her that silence didn't have to be the answer. By the time she finished her tea, Evelyn had made a decision. She would write about her experience, not just as a form of catharsis, but as a way to inspire others to stand up against injustice. After all, her life as a teacher had been dedicated to empowering others. And now, in her retirement, she saw an opportunity to continue that work in a different way. Later that evening, Vin received a call from his publicist. "Vin, what on earth happened at that bank? I'm getting calls from reporters asking if you're planning to make a statement." He sighed, running a hand over his shaved head. "I didn't do it for the headlines. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Let them write whatever they want. I'm not interested in spinning this into some PR story." The publicist hesitated. "Still, it's bound to get attention. People are going to want to know why you stepped in." "Because I could," Vin replied firmly. And because people like Evelyn shouldn't have to fight these battles alone. Now, if you don't mind, I've got a script to read. The next day, Evelyn was back at the bank. This time, the staff greeted her with apologetic smiles and eager assistance. She noticed the young employee who had spoken to Vin working diligently behind the counter. As she completed her business, Evelyn handed the woman a small note. Asterisk. Thank you for standing up when it mattered. Keep doing the right thing. Meanwhile, Vin couldn't shake the encounter from his mind. He reached out to a few friends in his circle, people who worked in philanthropy and advocacy, to brainstorm ways he could support similar causes. This isn't about me, he told them. It's about people like Evelyn who deserve to be treated with respect. Let's figure out how we can make that happen. For both Evelyn and Vin, that day marked the beginning of something bigger. Evelyn's newfound voice and determination led her to become a community advocate, sharing her story and encouraging others to stand up against prejudice. Vin, true to his word, began quietly funding initiatives aimed at addressing systemic discrimination in public spaces, including banks. Though their paths didn't cross again, the impact of their brief encounter rippled far beyond the walls of that bank. It became a reminder that courage, whether it's standing up for yourself or for someone else, has the power to change lives in ways you might never expect. The next day, Evelyn was back at the bank. This time, the staff greeted her with apologetic smiles and eager assistance. She noticed the young employee who had spoken to Vin working diligently behind the counter. As she completed her business, Evelyn handed the woman a small note. Asterisk. Thank you for standing up when it mattered. Keep doing the right thing. Meanwhile, Vin couldn't shake the encounter from his mind. He reached out to a few friends in his circle, people who worked in philanthropy and advocacy, to brainstorm ways he could support similar causes. This isn't about me, he told them. It's about people like Evelyn who deserve to be treated with respect. Let's figure out how we can make that happen. For both Evelyn and Vin, that day marked the beginning of something bigger. Evelyn's newfound voice and determination led her to become a community advocate, sharing her story and encouraging others to stand up against prejudice. Vin, true to his word, began quietly funding initiatives aimed at addressing systemic discrimination in public spaces, including banks. Though their paths didn't cross again, the impact of their brief encounter rippled far beyond the walls of that bank. It became a reminder that courage, whether it's standing up for yourself or for someone else, has the power to change lives in ways you might never expect.